Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Bava Kamma. We are up to Perek Vav Mishnah Bet. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Ranbai, Eliyahu ben Burcha, Israel of Chana bad Miriam, Sason ben Rai, and Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen. And Leavdi ben Chaim Lechaim v'derefua Shneimav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, Betoch Shah Chole Israel, and the Achlama Me'erav, Binyamin Od Zion Chai ben Dvorah. The Mishnah continues with the laws of preventing an animal from doing damage. If he locked up his sheep in its pen properly, meaning he locked the pen with a gate that can withstand a normal wind, but left it in the hot sun, or if he handed it over to a deaf mute, an insane person, or a minor, meaning he had one of these people watch the sheep for him, it escaped and did damage, Chayav, the owner is obligated to pay for the damage, because he acted negligently by leaving the sheep out in the sun. Although the gate would not fall as a result of a normal wind, it might not be able to withstand the desperate attempts of an overheated sheep to break out. Therefore, using such a gate is negligent if the animal will be exposed to the sun, or, in the other case, entrusting it to an unreliable person. But if he handed it over to a normal adult shepherd, the shepherd takes the place of the owner, which means that the shepherd must pay for any damage and not the owner. Only the shepherd is obligated to pay damages. The owner is not liable because he took care of the animal properly by entrusting it to a reliable person. Now the Gemara on page 56b in Masechet Bava Kamma objects that these laws have already been taught in chapter 4 Mishnah 9. Therefore, the Gemara explains that the Mishnah refers to a special case where the owner entrusted his sheep to a shepherd and then that shepherd gave it to his assistant to watch. The general rule is that if the owner of an object entrusts it to a shomer, the term for someone who watches the property of another, and the shomer hands it over to another shomer, the first shomer remains responsible for the object because the owner did not give him permission to entrust it to anyone else. In our case, then, the first shepherd should remain responsible for the sheep even after he gave it to his assistant. The Mishnah teaches that this is not so. Rather, the first shepherd ceases to be responsible and the assistant takes his place. Since it is standard practice for a shepherd to entrust his sheep to his assistants, the owner of the sheep presumably expected this to happen, and it is as though he gave permission. The responsibility for the sheep was therefore transferred to the assistant, and it is he who must pay for any damage. When the Mishnah says, Misara leroed nichnas roed tachtav, he handed it over to a shepherd, the shepherd takes his place, it means that if the first shepherd handed it over to a second shepherd, his assistant, the second shepherd takes the place of the first one. And again, this is the discussion in the Gemara in Masechet Bava Kamma, page 56b. The Mishnah discusses the law where an animal damaged growing produce, nafla legina ve'nehenet, if it accidentally fell into a garden. For example, the sheep was walking on its owner's roof that is next to the garden, or in a public area that is above the garden, and accidentally slipped where crops were growing, damaged the crops, and benefited from the damage it caused. For example, the crops cushioned the sheep's fall and thereby saved it from injury, or the sheep ate the crops. Mishalemet mashenenet, he must pay what it benefited from the crops, but he does not have to pay for the damage because the animal's fall into the garden was an unforeseeable accident for which he is not responsible. Although the owner does not have to pay for causing damage, mazik, he must pay for what he benefited, nehena. It is a general rule that whenever someone benefits from the property of another and causes the owner some loss, he must pay at least for the benefit. How to calculate the benefit that the sheep received depends on how the crops were damaged. If they were eaten, the sheep's owner must pay what it would have cost him to feed his animal with cheap animal food. If they were crushed by the sheep's fall, the owner is liable for the amount he would have paid to cushion his animal's fall and prevent it from being injured. However, if the sheep did not fall, rather it went down to the neighboring garden in its usual manner, and it did damage there, he pays the full value of what it damaged, because in this case he was negligent in letting the sheep enter the garden. The Mishnah explains how we assess damage done to a crop that was attached to the ground. How much does he pay for what it damaged? Shamin bet se'ah be'ota sadeh kamma ita yafa. We assess how much a bet se'ah of land, a relatively large area. A bet se'ah is an area of 2,500 square amot. When in the shape of a square, it measures 50 by 50 amot. We assess how much a bet se'ah of land in that field was worth before the animal damaged the produce of a small part of it. the Kamma Yafa, and how much that Bitsea is worth after damage, the owner of the animal pays the difference. We do not assess the value of the eaten produce itself, meaning how much money such produce cost in the market. Instead, we assess how much the land went down in value because some of its produce was eaten. This is much less than the value of the produce on its own. Furthermore, although the animal ate the produce of only a small area of land, we do not calculate how much the value of that small area was reduced. It is derived from the Torah that we look at a Bitsea in which that small area was located, and we calculate how much the entire Bitsea went down in value. This makes the payment even lower because someone buying an entire Bitsea does not care all that much if the produce of a small area within it was eaten. Now, according to this previous Tana, the owner does not pay the cost of the damaged produce, but only the reduction in the value of the land. The next Tana basically agrees with this rule, but he makes the following exception. Rabbi Shimon says, Achla perot gemurim, if it ate ripe produce which is ready to be harvested and sold, Mishlemet perot gemurim, he pays the value of the ripe produce. Im sa'ah, for example, if the animal ate a sa'ah of produce, he pays the price of a sa'ah of produce. Im satayim, and if it ate 2 sa'ahs of produce, he pays the price of 2 sa'ah of produce. This Tana holds that the damage done to ripe produce which no longer needs the ground is assessed according to the value of the produce itself. Only damage to unripe produce which still needs to be attached to the ground is assessed according to the value of the land. And the Rav does tell us, V'alachak Rabbi Shimon, the halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. That is in of Mishnah Bet. Mishnah Gimel continues to discuss damage that an animal does by eating. Shen. Hamagdish betoch sadeh shel chavero shelo birshut. If someone made stacks of his grain in his neighbor's field without permission, v'achalatan be'emto shel ba'al hasadeh, and an animal belonging to the owner of the field ate from them, patur, the owner of the field is not obligated to pay for the eaten grain because the owner of the grain had no right to put it there. V'imus kaben, and if the landowner's animal was damaged by the stacks, for example, it slipped on them and was injured, bala gadish chayav, the owner of the stack is obligated to pay for the damage to the animal since he created a hazard, a bull, in his neighbor's field without permission. These laws were already taught in chapter 5, Mishnah 2. They are repeated here in order to teach that one may not place his produce even in an open field unless he has the landowner's permission. V'imikdish birshut, but if someone made stacks of his grain in his neighbor's field with permission and an animal belonging to the owner of the field ate from them, Ba'al hasadeh chayav, the owner of the field is obligated to pay for the eaten grain because by allowing the grain to be stored in his field, he presumably agreed to protect the grain from damage, even though he did not say so explicitly. Now, the Tana of our Mishnah seems to hold that whenever a landowner allows things to be stored on his property, it is assumed that he accepts the responsibility to protect them from harm. In chapter 5, Mishnah 3, however, Rebbe ruled that the owner of a courtyard does not automatically become responsible to protect an ox or other item that he allows on his property. To bring our Mishnah in line with Rebbe's ruling, the Gemara in page 59b in Masechet Bava Kamma explains our Mishnah as referring to a special case where the farmers of the area would stack their grain in one person's field each year and they would appoint him to guard it. Even if the owner of that field only said, "Bring your grain into my field," without adding, "and I will guard it," Rebbe would agree that he presumably agrees to guard it. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.